Hello, we are back in Southerness for a dev retreat. It's just me, Gabe, and Thomas this time, and we are trying to finish a side project called DisasteRally. Now, it's a small mobile game. We're still working on Dr. Dad. Thomas is actually working on Dr. Dad right now, but we've created this small side project so we can get games out quicker. So Dr. Dad can take like a year to make, but these little ones you can just knock out in like 2 months. So we're gonna take you through the game, and then we're gonna talk about procedural texturing.
So DisasteRally is a fun little game we made about racing with this small cart on top of like roads suspended in nowhere and feeling a lot at it. Yeah, the aim of the game is to get all 3 stars or level to possibly unlock something secret in the end.
What you need to play this game, you need a smartphone, VR headset, and a wireless Bluetooth controller. Wireless Bluetooth controller and a headset for mobile VR can cost around £10 together. So it's not that expensive, and there's a lot of games on the store that require these anyway. So if you get them, you're not just going to be able to play our game. There's a lot of games on there as well. But you should just play our game. So I'm going to be taking you through the process of creating an asset using procedural textures. These procedural textures are made up of nodes, and each of these little icons here are nodes that either generate or manipulate a texture. We're going to work our way from the end of the node chain backwards. So to start off, we have a shader, essentially. Now, this is just an emission shader, so you plug all your color into that and it just emits it flat. Because we're using flat shaders in Unity, we don't want to be calculating any light or anything like that, so we're just using an emission shader just to see what it'll look like in Unity when the piece is finished. Next, we have a mix node. Now, what a mix node does is take 2 textures and blends between them. So I'll duplicate this. I can go pink, green, and it fades between them. What you can do is add another texture that will act as a mask. So if I grab just a noise texture and plug that in, up the contrast a little bit, you can see how parts of it are now pink and parts of it are now green based on the noise texture. So you can start to see how you can create complex textures using nothing but procedural images. Now, the mask that is driving this mix shader is this up here. Now, this is the only part of the material that isn't fully procedural. What I had to do is to separate out the faces here and the faces here, is to essentially manually unwrap them. All these textures exist here, and all these textures exist either here or here. I can't remember. I'm doing that because then I can manually separate them. I can be like, okay, I can use that image as a mask and tell this part of the geometry to be white and this part of the geometry to be this other texture, wherever I want it to be. So that's what that's doing. Now, we follow this. These are essentially just color adjustments that you can make. So that's just like color correction. Okay, so how I got the gradient here. Essentially, I unwrap it, but it's projected flat. So I project the model so it's totally flat along here. I then add a gradient texture, which procedurally creates a gradient along that UV space. I can then manipulate the gradient using a color ramp to change the color I want to. This node is not doing anything. I can delete it. And by doing that, you can create the gradient, this fall off of the gradient here, and you can see that I can manipulate it using these V handles. Okay, so that's how you create the gradient. Now, if I just take that gradient and plug that in, it's super flat. There's not much depth or detail to it. You can't really tell what's going on. So what I've done, this is where it starts to get complicated. I took a geometry node and took the true normal output, and what that does is essentially, depending on which way the face is facing on the model, it will shade it slightly differently. If it's facing negative X, it will be black. If it's facing plus X, it will be white. Negative Y, it will be black. Plus Y, white, same for Z. So what essentially that does is just create a diagonal gradient, which isn't that useful. But what you can do is separate that out. So I just want the Z information. So here I've added a separate XYZ node, plug that into a brightness and contrast just so it's just color correction. Same, just color correction. What that's doing is creating a texture like this. Now it has depth to it. I can use a mix shader again, overlay the depth into there, and you create what I think something that looks pretty nice. That's the kind of general idea of texturing something procedurally. It's relatively complicated looking at it from an outsider's perspective, but once you start to get in there and understand how nodes work and how you can mix things to create something unique, it becomes relatively easy and really fun to do. You can create really interesting things, like even the skybox, that's totally procedural. So there's nothing else that's been put into that. That's texturing with procedural nodes. Dun, dun, dun.
So leave us a comment about what you think about the video. If you like it, like it. If you didn't like it, well, don't like it. And if you want content that is more like this, subscribe to our channel. Peace.
Zach, say bye.
Bye.
Say it more enthusiastically.
Bye.
And now do something entertaining.